Welcome to Bedcrime Stories Podcast. I'm your host, T. And if true crime is your jam, and like me, you enjoy delving into unsolved cases, trying to figure out who done it, please consider subscribing. Also, if you enjoy my videos, please hit that like button. After hearing about Kingsport resident Randy Haas, who is a friend of the Wells neighbor Andy Bernard, I wanted to learn more about Haas. And my oh my, does this guy have a troubling history. Get a snack and a drink because this story is a doozy. Let's dig in. Randy Haas's name came up in the Summer Wells case because of his connection to Andy Bernard and that troubling history I mentioned. The story goes that Bernard and his partner and the mother of his two children, Jody Sue Brown, let Haas into their home to use their Wi-Fi. On the surface, this sounds like a mundane story, unworthy of mention. And if Randy Haas were just an average law-abiding citizen from Kingsport, Tennessee, no one would care about whether or not he used Bernard's Wi-Fi. But Randy Haas is not your average law-abiding citizen, and his criminal background is such that most parents of youngish children, provided they are conscientious, would bolt the door if they saw Haas approaching their houses. Let me tell you why. Randy Carl Haas worked for the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office as a jailer/corrections officer for 16 years, starting in August of 1995. And ending in April of 2011 when he was fired. In addition to working as a corrections officer, Haas was also an explorer scoutmaster for a decade. Sounds like a perfectly upstanding citizen, at least on paper and at first glance. In case you don't know about the Explorers program, let me explain. In Kingsport, Tennessee, there's a police explorer program in which employees of the Kingsport Police Department volunteer to work with young kids called explorers. The organization in Kingsport is described as an organization that enables young adults, male and female, to participate in many types of educational and recreational activities. The purpose of the program is to allow young adults who are interested in law enforcement as a career to learn about the occupation. Scout masters are supposed to mentor the children who sign up for the program. The role of scoutmaster typically involves taking the kids out into the country and letting them camp and hike and learn survival skills. Whoever takes on this role is expected to protect and mentor the kids entrusted into their care. And I'm sure when you have a corrections officer who wants to be a scoutmaster, most people are automatically going to trust that person. He's wearing a uniform after all, and he's supposed to be protecting the community. Kids and parents alike would probably tend to have faith in such a person right out of the gate. But it would appear that at least in Randy Haas's case, he may have volunteered to be a scoutmaster not out of a desire to mentor, guide, and protect young scouts, but rather because of the access it gave him to young kids. Factor in remote wilderness settings, the woods, and overnight activities like camping, and you have a situation where someone with not so nice proclivities toward little kids can indulge in his or her fantasies without adult witnesses. I'm sad to say that Randy Haas appears to be one such person. It turns out that in April of 2011, Haas was investigated by the sheriff's office when it began receiving complaints about Haas from parents of scouts in the Explorer program. Haas had taken the young scouts on an overnight trip to participate in a Civil War reenactment. Sounds like a nice, wholesome experience where kids would learn about history while spending time in the great outdoors. When detectives searched Haas's computer and phone, they discovered a cache of images showing scouts in bondage-type scenarios. Some of these kids were photographed covered in fake blood with lash marks on their bodies. Other photos allegedly captured naked young men changing their clothes after swimming in a creek. How Randy Haas was able to convince the young boys to pose for the photos is anyone's guess. Perhaps he sold it to them in terms of taking cool, scary photos with them, like Friday the 13th. Wouldn't that be fun, kids? In late April of 2011, the then 45-year-old Randy Haas was officially accused of taking pictures of underage children, and the photos were categorized as patently offensive. He was promptly terminated for violating the sheriff's office code of conduct. The police report listed the incident location as Cave Hill Road in Blountville, Tennessee. In researching Blountville, that's hard to say, I discovered that it was the scene of one of the most famous battles of the American Civil War, the Battle of Blountville. It is also where Civil War reenactors go to reenact this battle. Thus, I think it's safe to assume that this is where the Civil War reenactment that Haas took the Explorer Scouts to took place. For those of you who love history, the 4-hour-long Battle of Blountville took place on September 22, 1863. It began when a Union Army unit attacked Confederate troops. During the battle, the town was heavily shelled, and the courthouse was burned to the ground, which forced the Confederate soldiers to retreat. Today, the Battle of Blountville Civil War Park and Reenactment is a nonprofit that's dedicated to preserving the Battle of Blountville. Sounds cool, right? So you can imagine how stoked those young Explorer Scouts must have been to go on this adventure with their trusted scoutmaster, Randy Haas. But because Haas couldn't control his impulses, what should have been an enriching cultural experience turned into a sicko photo shoot for his delight. This Haas guy reminds me of when I served on a jury in a case where a man was accused of SA against a minor. During the week-long trial, we found out how this man showed up at a scouting event in a woods near a lake. That's where he attacked this child. Parents, if your kids are in Scouts or Girl Scouts, make sure you know who's in charge when they go off on these retreats. Randy Haas was eventually indicted on 42 counts of SEXUAL, exploitation of a minor. In 2013, the former corrections officer agreed to a plea deal in which he pled guilty to 27 counts of facilitation of the same crime I just mentioned, and to 10 counts of official misconduct. The parties agreed to a sentence of 20 years, with 15 of those years to be served under supervised probation. Haas was also placed on the SO registry. In 2015, Haas appealed his sentence and asked an appellate court to do away with his 5-year prison sentence, contending that he had suffered enough by losing his job and reputation. Haas told the court that he had even stopped going to church for fear his presence would discourage others from attending. Wow. Just wow. The audacity. In his appeal, Haas asked Sullivan County Circuit Judge Rob Montgomery to give him probation and a diversionary program instead, which would have left the dozens of convictions he had for that crime I described earlier and official misconduct off his record, provided he successfully completed the probation. The appellate court shot down Haas's appeal and left his 5-year prison sentence intact. Thank God for little favors. Here's what the appellate panel wrote about its decision. We hold that the trial court did not err in denying the appellant alternative sentencing or probation. We find no abuse of discretion and no basis for rebutting the presumption that the trial court's decision was reasonable." End quote. And this, my friends, is the man that Jody Sue Brown and her ex, Andy Bernard, allowed into their homes to use their Wi-Fi. Why did Haas need to use Bernard's Wi-Fi? That's the million-dollar question. And how often did Haas head over to the Bernards? Was this a one-time deal, or was he over there repeatedly? Were the children at home when he visited? One more scary offender who spent time near 110 Ben Hill Road, where Summer Wells lived. Until the next time on Bed Crime Stories. Now please hit that like button, leave me a comment, and if you want to support my channel and my YouTube journey, please consider a donation.